Hello everybody, it's Neil Foley from the Business Growth Club. I'm really pleased today to introduce you to Barbara Reid of Breed Events. How are you, Barbara?
I'm very well, thank you very much for having me, Neil.
Yeah, well, my pleasure, of course, Barbara. What we're going to hopefully explore over the next half an hour or so is, and may sound a really strange title, but I can assure you it's quite a fascinating topic. Is the Swiss way of doing business relevant for small and medium businesses in the light of Brexit? I mean, how's that for a title? I mean, how did you come up with that one, Barbara?
Oh, dear. I know I've made my own work hard for myself here.
You have?
I have. Well, I've thought of what's going to add value to our listeners. Mm-hmm. And I thought, as a Swiss national and British national, I have a really good viewpoint of how both business and economies work, having worked and lived in both countries, and then set on to cross and compare. And I mean, Brexit is quite a topic at the moment, isn't it?
Yes, you can't get away from Brexit, whichever way you look at it, can you?
No, and I don't want to delve too much in the politics of it, and is it right, is it wrong? Let's be honest, we all have one thing in common, is that we have no idea what's going to happen.
Very true. It doesn't sound like the Europeans do either.
No, absolutely. So why don't we look at what we do know? And we know how the Swiss operate. They're not part of the EU. They are part of the Schengen Agreement. Also, they're quite unique as a country in the way they work and their economy works. So why don't we look to them and have a little glance into the Swiss way of doing business?
That's an excellent idea. So just set the scene a little bit. You've got a British dad and a Swiss mum, is that right?
That's right. My dad is Welsh, originally from Cardiff, and my mum is from central Switzerland with a very Swiss surname of Odermatt, which means you can't get very much more Swiss than that, going back hundreds and hundreds of generations.
Really?
Yes. And I come from a small village in the central Switzerland near Lucerne. It's called Bourgs. And I grew up there for 20 years until I decided to go on an adventure, packed 20 kilos and went off to London. And I think my parents thought I was going to return in a few weeks. And, 10 years later, I'm still here.
And settled here.
And settled in Norwich. I love Norwich. It's such a beautiful city and it's such a beautiful place to live and work. So it ticked all my boxes, even though a little bit flat for my liking into comparison what I'm used to.
Yes, we don't have many mountains in Norfolk, do we?
No. But
many
you have
hills.
the sea, which obviously in Switzerland
Yes.
we're deprived of. So I do love that.
Okay. So how do the Swiss do things business-wise then?
Okay, I think the first thing to ascertain is that Switzerland is really different to the UK in size, but also in culture. And one of the main things in Switzerland is that you actually have 3 or 4 cultures within it from their languages. So there's 4 official languages. And sometimes those areas actually disagree with each other on a political and economical spectrum as well. So you already have quite a mix. But then if you look at the UK, there's similar because we have all this multicultural, we have different cultures,
and
different languages.
Wales being different.
Wales and Scotland. So there are similarities there. I guess size is the biggest difference.
Yes.
So from an economy point, and I have pulled these figures off the internet because I'm not very good with numbers, but the way to sort of look at it, people talk about GDR, and that's basically just the wealth of the country. So the UK is 300% on the world average. Switzerland is 600% on the world average.
Wow.
So double. But from a size-wise, Switzerland is actually 8 times smaller than the UK in population. And when I look at Switzerland and the economy and the business, what I find really, really, really interesting is that they are the leaders in Europe for innovations.
The Swiss?
The Swiss are the top number 1 for innovation.
Right.
Why is that? So I had a little look into it, and there's R&D, so research and development funding. Now, not going into complicated figures, but the UK spends double the amount, or in pounds, billions, worth on R&D. But Switzerland's 8 times smaller. So from a scale basis, you can sort of see that they're actually per person investing a lot more. And I think that's where the richness comes from when we talk about the stereotypes of Switzerland when it comes to high productivity, efficiency, punctuality. Swiss products are expensive, but they're high quality assured, which is why the brand Made in Switzerland is so worth so much.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's sort of the parallels that I drew from stats.
Okay. So, as surprising as it, because you'd have, I don't know why, I'd have probably guessed that the Germans would have been more innovative or more into R&D.
Yeah.
But obviously the Swiss have sort of...
No, yeah, that's true. Now, I'm not an economist, but I'm going to look at my outlet of where I grew up in Switzerland and what career opportunities were available to me. So, and we can then look at the parallels with UK. So basically, I went to school and then a small percentage go off and do what's equivalent to A-levels and university, but it's only a small percentage.
Is it?
Yes, absolutely. And most of us leave school, go and join an apprenticeship, and then do further education within our lines of careers. So that's one.
And would the apprenticeship be via the employer then? So,
Yes,
so a
via
small percentage would go to higher education, but most would go via an employer.
Via an employer. And then if I think of all the businesses that were available to choose from in my region, well, they were actually all small to medium-sized businesses.
Were they?
And what's even more striking is that most of them were family-owned businesses and still are.
Oh, right, okay.
So here in the UK, we have this bit of a philosophy of we build up businesses and then sell them on.
Yeah.
That's quite clearly different in Switzerland, where in Switzerland, traditionally, obviously times move on, but traditionally, businesses have been built hundreds of years ago by families and get passed down the line.
Really?
Yes.
To men and women, so sons and daughters?
Well, that's a whole other conversation that we can have another day.
Okay.
Probably now, yes, absolutely.
But traditionally it would have been to the sons.
I would have thought so. I think whoever probably made the best business case would have got it. I mean, if I think about my family's business, so from my mum's side, her father, they had a butcher. And that went down, to the eldest son. It did, actually, yes. So,
right.
Yeah, that would tally up with that. But then within that family, so there's 7 siblings, there at least 3 other businesses were made out of that as well, yeah.
So the Swiss are very business-orientated.
Very business. Actually very money-orientated, which goes hand in hand.
Hand in hand.
Yeah.
And family is important?
Yeah.
More so than probably over here, do you think? Because here we're quite dispersed and families don't stay in the same area and...
That's very true, actually. I haven't even thought about that.
No.
I mean, for me it's very difficult because I moved over when I was 20.
But you were unusual in doing that.
Yes, I was, out of the norm for doing that. And, you know, there are some people in Switzerland who are still quite angry with me that I left, you know.
Really?
Because... Let's be honest, it's one of the most beautiful places to live.
Yes.
For me...
So why would you go?
Why would I go? Well, I was half British, half Swiss, so I had different cultures within me and I had aspirations and I wanted to go and explore and do something different and go and do something for myself. But if I look at my friends, most of them still live in the county that we grew up with. Yeah, they might have moved within villages. Most of them, not all, have families and careers. I think I have the perception that it is harder for a woman to own their own business or have a career and the family at the same time, because I think, but it's the same challenges as over here.
It's the same here, isn't it?
Nurseries are mega expensive.
Are they?
I don't think they have any paternity leave, or they might have just had a vote to get a little bit of paternity leave in. Because I remember when my friends gave birth to her child, her husband actually had to take time off work to go and be there at the hospital. You know, it's very different over here, where we're in a very great situation where our partners can get paternity and we have that right to do so.
I get the impression with Switzerland that it's a lot about self-reliance, isn't there?
Yeah, Yeah, you could say so. I mean, Switzerland itself is not as old. It's 1291 was the year it was founded, and it was founded amidst a lot of war, which is not something you associated with Switzerland, and a lot of turmoil. And actually, Switzerland got invaded a few times as well after by the French. So, yes, there is a reliability for the Swiss themselves, and maybe that's why they do a lot of business internally and with each other.
Do they?
Yes, I think they do.
And from what you said in terms of you haven't been forgiven by some people for leaving 10 years ago, is part of the culture as well that they've got long memories, so you actually don't be too overly aggressive with each other, or you actually remember that if you're a family business, you're going to be wanting to do in business with somebody in 20, 30, 50 years' time?
Absolutely.
Because that's different than here, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. I think relationships are really key in Switzerland.
Are they?
And actually they should be really key to us when we do business and market ourselves. And, the way we work with suppliers, we shouldn't be looking at who does the best deal. We should be looking at who's going to give us the best quality service at a fair price, of course. But it's about building relationships and trust. And
the Swiss way is doing that?
Yes, from what I understand, in the smaller economy scale of central Switzerland, of where I grew up, absolutely. If you're looking at bigger companies that export, there's a lot of exporting going on in Switzerland, then of course you take a leap of faith and you might not know your counterpart from China, but I'm sure you will have advisors from the Swiss embassy to reassure you that this is a good match. I wouldn't think, even though the Swiss are really great at innovation, it doesn't strike me as great risk takers.
No, I think they're quite conservatives with a small c, aren't they?
Yeah, but a calculated risk.
Yes.
Not
there's nothing wrong with being conservative in saying, actually, look after your own first and don't take too much risk.
Yeah. Obviously, you have to take risks to get a return.
Sure.
But if you're calculated and measured about it, then that's absolutely fine, and sometimes obviously might not work out, but I don't think anyone would be putting in money that they don't have.
Yes, because they're not great borrowers, are they?
No. I mean, I got brought up on the fundamentals is that you don't spend what you don't have.
Yep.
So don't get yourself in credit card debt.
Yep.
And so on. I may have become a bit more British in that respect, to be honest. Well,
Glad we've had some influence on it.
Oh, absolutely. And again, it all goes about, for me personally, it's all about the calculated risk again.
Yes.
So I've started up a business. You can't start up a business with nothing. You need to invest something to get a return. But I've made a calculated assessment to whether am I going to make a return or not, and then have accepted the probability of that. So if it doesn't work out, I'm not going to, I'm not going to be ruined.
No.
But at the same time, I can see the potential and opportunity in having your own business and owning your own business and what that brings with it.
It's a balance, isn't it? Because I guess you're right. The American and to a degree the British way is we can be quite risk takers, especially with other people's money, or we can be unnecessary risk sometimes where people haven't necessarily thought. Certainly, that's the US way. There's often leap before a proper assessment. You often see that with the US when they buy companies. But the Swiss way. Because I think of that with people like Nestle and the rest of it, and you don't get much bigger than Nestle.
Well, no, so Nestle is actually, and I've read about this yesterday, Nestle is actually the biggest employer in Switzerland.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me.
But that's worldwide, so it's something like 330,000. I'm not good with numbers, but it was a very big numbers of worldwide employees. And the other thing to remember about Switzerland also is that they have a lot of multinational companies with their headquarters in Switzerland.
Yes.
So they're not necessarily Swiss companies per se, but they are multinationals. And, tax rates might be of interest for international companies, and we can...
And it's security. It's
security. I mean... When was Switzerland involved in any conflict?
Their neutral stances has always played well.
Neutral peacekeepers, a stable environment.
Yeah.
I mean, the unemployment rate has been at 3% consistently.
Really?
And 3%, what is that?
We would probably call that full employment.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So,
and that's been consistent, and that's the thing. There's been no recession, which of course makes it hard for me when during the recession, I was quite badly hit by it. And when I was trying to communicate with my friends and family of how hard it was for me to try and find a job, or how maybe badly paid the jobs were available to me, there wasn't much sympathy for me. There was like, what do you mean you're unemployed? That doesn't happen, does it? Because there is an association there that if you're unemployed in Switzerland, well, surely you must be doing something wrong.
It's because you don't want a job.
Yeah.
Fundamentally different, especially from where your dad came from in Wales, which is, with the demise of coal and steel, etc.
Yeah.
Has been...
Well, my dad was in the forces and he travelled a lot. Well, his whole family was in the forces, Royal Air Force, and I don't think he actually spent that much time in Cardiff, because he always tells me about how he lived in Scotland and in Cyprus and all corners of England.
Really?
So
joys of the RAF.
The joys of the RAF, and he ended up in Switzerland somehow. And he actually did something very similar to me. So just if he's listening, he went to Switzerland on a contract at an aircraft company, and was meant to come back to the UK, and then just happened to meet my mum's and then stayed. So
you can't tell you too much. So if we were looking at saying, what do you think small and medium-sized companies could learn over here then about the Swiss way? Is it about the relationships? I mean, what to you strikes you as the big thing we could learn?
There's a big word going on at the moment, especially in light with the budget and everything, and that's called productivity.
Yes.
And I think as a small business, we can do our small part and look at the ways how we do business, how we conduct ourselves on a day-to-day, how efficient we are, and if our productivity is up. And if it's not up or going up, assess what else can we do to future-proof our company, especially with Brexit looming. We're not saying this is a bad or a good thing. We're just saying it's an unknown. So we need to make sure, in terms of our businesses, we are shored up for that. And it's maximising opportunities that are open to us. The other thing is, so we talked about innovation and we talked about research and development funding. Now, the Swiss, yes, they invest more. They have got more money available to them. So it's a different ball game. But 3/4 of all that funding comes from the private sector. We're not far behind. The UK's expenditure is made up of 66%, but I think even small businesses and medium-sized businesses have to take responsibility to invest into the future. And that's for me as well. I mean, I'm a startup. It's quite ambitious. At the moment, my first worry is obviously making the business stable and sustainable. But the next thing I'll be looking at too is making it future-proof. And that is investing money into, for example, technology that will set me apart from my competition. And I'm not even just talking locally or nationally, but looking beyond and looking at the bigger picture. And I think that's what the Swiss have got over us.
And they've been doing that. It's embedded in the culture.
It's embedded in the culture, and I think we need to embed that culture within ourselves. And we have it. I mean, the Brits have a great history of being fantastic engineers. We have really great education systems available and opportunities available. So we need to put the money in.
And I guess that possibly the link there is the family businesses, because you can take a very long-term view rather than, I need this to work next week or next month. You can actually afford to say, actually, no, we're... And I guess the mindset's different, isn't it? If I'm thinking about a business as a way of earning some money, that's one thing. If I'm thinking of a business as being, this is my inheritance or this is my family for X generations, it's a different mindset, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, you'll probably find this funny. When I went through some business mentoring and courses and things, I was really surprised by one of the first questions asked me, and it was called the exit strategy. And actually, I got really cross because I thought, what do you mean exit strategy? This is my business. Why would I want to exit? Obviously, now it makes all a bit more sense, and I look at my own business actually in two separate ways. On one hand, I'm developing products and services which may become an exit strategy. However, the core of the business, Breed Events, is mine, and that is my legacy, and that is hopefully one day going to be my inheritance, as well as something that I can pass on, a bit like a house.
Yeah, that's very different. You're absolutely right. And I hadn't thought of that until you said it, but you're right. It's one of the first things that people talk about is an exit strategy.
Yeah.
And that is one of the things with capitalism in very much embedded in the West. It's about, making your money and selling it to somebody else rather than the legacy.
Yeah,
that's a very good point, isn't it?
Yeah, and I guess in a way that reflects on the way I do day-to-day business and the way I communicate or treat clients is that I take the long-term view.
Yes.
And I guess maybe naively, I just sort of expect that everyone has the same mentality of going, what do you mean exit strategy? This is my business and I have pride in this and I want this to go the long way. So, I can't say that I'm expecting Breed Events to be called Breed Events in 100 years' time, but it'd be nice if something of it would still sort of live
And it is
on.
a different mindset, isn't it? It's just popped into my head. I remember reading a really fascinating book. It's not a business book. It's called The Shepherd's Life by a fellow called James Rebus, I think. It's all about being a shepherd in the Lake District. But there it's about not robbing your neighbour. Because when you're dealing in sheep and selling sheep to each other, the prices are open to negotiation. And there was an example in the book where he actually, as a young man, didn't necessarily take advantage, but he got a very good deal out of a neighbour. And the understanding was the following year you return the favour. Because actually for generations you're going to deal with people. So it's about being fair to your neighbours. And that sounds like the Swiss thing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And that's not a British thing, really.
No, and I think it was one of the main things that motivated me to start up my own business is that, I'd worked in lots of different companies, some really great, some less so. And one of the things that really annoyed me was, so I deal with events. And one of the things that really annoyed me is when the client would have an idea and they would go along with it. And then I would hear all the sort of people who are involved with putting this on going like, oh, this is a terrible idea. And, okay, I was an admin person, At that, I was really new in the game. But I sort of was sitting there quietly going like, but that's not right. If it's not a good idea, why don't you tell them it's not a good idea and come up with something better? Because surely if your clients are doing well and they like you and they'll stick with you.
If the events are success for the client, they come back, don't they?
They'll
and
come
rebook
back.
for the following year.
Absolutely. And it's not just... And with events as well, so this makes me maybe a bit different to other event people, is that I don't actually focus on the one event. I look at the overall picture because I think an event needs to, especially in business terms, needs to fit in to the overall picture of the business. So, if people want to put on a party and just throw some money up in the air, that's all fine and well, but I'm not going to be the company that's going to be organising that for you. I'm more interested in how can we make a greater return on what you're spending. If that's monetary or sales or actually getting a message across, that's a different question. But it goes back to that Swiss fundamental of, I look after you, you look after me.
So that's that would be one of your key points when you started thinking about this, Barbara, in terms of it's about the longer-term relationship more so than the quick buck.
Absolutely.
And that could be really an important lesson, because if we enter a recession, over here recessions are cyclical. We just don't know how long the cycle is, but we're bound to enter another recession. And actually, if you've got the fundamentals right in terms of your relationships with suppliers and clients, actually you're in a better place, aren't you?
Yeah, and at the same time, we all have to say there's no right or wrong way of doing it. And also there's nothing that's going to be recession proof. You know, it depends how hard it gets and how cold the winter gets. And there are businesses that are quite frankly not going to survive. And I actually class my own business at great risk of a recession, because the first thing that gets cut off is marketing and events. So it's my job now, taking the longer viewpoint of going, okay, so I'm very good at organising events. I'm very good at looking the long way. So what can I do with my company that makes it not recession-proof, but at least that I can survive and protect?
Well, that's where maybe your mother's side comes in terms of the Swiss side, which is about being cautious with money, not overstretching, because fundamentally, businesses don't necessarily, they sometimes die because of a bad idea, but actually they die because they don't have enough cash.
Cash flows.
So if you can protect yourself by being cautious and tight and prudent.
And I think that's another good point, especially as a startup and as someone who, I don't have a business degree. I have a degree in event management, and that was great, but I think I've learned more over the last 6 months of building a business. And I went on a really interesting course with a company called Creating Value, who's local as well. And they've got this board game.
No, I've heard of it.
You've heard of it, and they're fantastic because it allowed me to understand real-term cash flow.
Yes.
And once I understood this, I really understood what I let myself in for.
Just as well you hadn't done it at the beginning.
And I suddenly went, oh my goodness. But what a great thing to learn.
Yep. And now's the time to learn it, isn't it?
Yeah, now's the time to do it. I mean, like I said, I'm still quite new in the game, and I'm going to learn a lot of things, I'm pretty sure. But this is the time for me to act and be proactive and get in this long-term vision, basically, in place.
And that's the fundamentals that we're talking about.
Yeah,
so you said you're in event management. So what is Breed Events? I know we're going to talk about this another time, but just give me a flavour of what Breed Events actually is.
Okay, so Breed Events is a full-service events company in its essence. What we specialise in is working with companies that are participating or putting on an event for an objective. Which you would think every event does, but you'd be surprised how many people I've talked to, and they said, we'll just put on some networking events. And I go, why? And they go, well, just because we can. I was like, but what are you trying to achieve? Are the people coming to your networking events actually your target audience? Oh, no, they're just people we know, and, and that's just, I smile and nod and shake hands and then slowly walk away, because I sort of go, you don't get it.
No.
I think the recession hasn't been all that bad, because it means for event managers like me, we've had to really understand what return on investment is and become more business focused. So instead of just putting on a lovely do with lovely lighting, which, you should still do, you need to look at the fundamentals of why you're doing it. And if your client has a brilliant idea, you need to find a way of making that happen, but in a way that it achieves those objectives. And with that, if the client ends up spending more than what they're actually getting out of, then maybe you have to be honest to yourself and go, look, I really like you, but this is not going to work. If you still want to go ahead with it, it's your own thing, but it's not going to work.
So you're focused far more on objectives for clients rather than saying, yes, we'll do the event and take that. Because I guess rather cynically, I've always thought event management is more about, could you just do the admin and the rest of it? Whereas what you're trying to do makes a lot more sense, is to say, let's look at the fundamentals and how does it fit within your overall marketing strategy. Because if we make this work, this is something that we should be repeating and repeating.
Yeah, and the idea for it, where it came from, was when you read event briefs or even things on the internet to pitch for, basically. Sorry, the word has just gone from me, but basically...
When you need for a tender document.
A tender, that's the one. So, and you read those tender documents, and it's very, very, very clear that it hasn't been written by an event manager.
Really?
Because they're really high level, they're sort of a bit wishy-washy, but they've been written by a business developer or CEO with an idea, but we need to marry the two together.
Yes.
We need to marry the overriding objective and the practicality of the event.
Yep.
You know, because there are some fundamental logistics, things like the customer experience, queuing, and there's a lot of places where you can waste money, like ordering too much catering, for example, or you know, instead of going the digital route, why, you know, printing loads of paper? Don't do that. That's just a waste. So you do need that type of knowledge, but you need to marry the two together.
So how do people get in contact with you? So because I know from what we've talked about in the past, you're happy to talk to anybody who's thinking of event or organising events. How do people get in contact with you, Barbara?
Absolutely. So I have a brand new website, just launched, and it's www.breedevents.co.uk.
Okay.
Alternatively, just drop me an email to barbara@breedevents.co.uk, and I'm happy to talk. You know, no commitment needed. Let's just have a coffee, let's have a chat, and see if I can help. And if not, I might be able to point you in the right direction who could help. And taking the Swiss view, take the long-term view. So that's why you take the long-term view. Well, that's been really interesting, and I really appreciate your time, Barbara. Thank you for that. We'll have a transcript of this up on the website, and if you want to find out more, obviously you can get hold of barbara@breedevents.co.uk. Or look at thebusinessgrowthclub.net. And until next time, goodbye.